the We're All Going to Die Act. The We're All Going to Die Act. Because that just about sums up how callous they're being with the American people. For many Americans, health care is the difference between life and death. Democrats will fight this bill with everything we've got. The American people deserve to know the truth. And one more point I would say to my colleagues. Donald Trump is selling you Republican colleagues a bill of goods. It's not going to hurt anybody. Don't believe his false words, because when you vote for this bill, the effects will actually occur. And the public will realize what you have done. So don't let Donald Trump sell you a bill of goods. We know he makes things up out of the clear blue all the time. He's doing it now. And when he calls you in and tells you that no one's going to be hurt and no one's going to lose coverage, you know that's a crock of you-know-what. Can't say it here. Don't listen to him, because your constituents will pay an awful price in health care, and they will know you did it. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, are we in a quorum call?
We are not, Senator.
Mr. President, I rise today in strong opposition to the President's request to Congress this week to eliminate $9.4 billion in funding that has already been passed and signed into law. Let's say that again. Already passed, signed into law. Anyone that watches Schoolhouse Rock, listens to the song, know how a bill becomes a law. A Republican-led House, at the time a Democratic-led Senate, came together, made an agreement, passed a bill, signed into law by the then president. But this president thinks he can just come in and change everything when it comes to really important things for people in this country that I'm about to get to. That's just not how it works. We got to do our jobs, and people need to stand up and say, this is our part of the job. We make the decisions about the funding. The president can veto them. He can work with us, as we could be doing right now. Instead, it's just a one-pony show. But that's how this place works. So what this proposal would do would gut funding that's already been appropriated for broadcasting, public broadcasting, and slash critical international aid funding, programs that had long had bipartisan support. I'm the daughter of a newspaperman. I care a lot about people getting information, getting news. And right now I care a lot about it in rural America because there has been such a breakdown of news coverage of small newspapers that have folded, in part because we won't do anything about the social media companies, about Facebook and Google and how they're able to use the content without being reimbursed. Just let it sit there as their lobbyists come in and stop it. But while we're doing that, in a lot of these areas now, the only news, the only way for them to find out about what's going on with a storm or what's happening with a wildfire or what's even happening with their local softball team or what's happening with the high school or what business is opening or closing is through these sources of public radio and public TV. Public broadcasting reaches nearly 99% of Americans with free programming, delivering life-saving emergency alerts, vital local news, and shows that talk about what's actually happening locally and what's true and what's happening and what events are going on and when they can attend the school fair, all those kinds of things. But President Trump has decided to try to claw back the money Congress has already provided, I guess to pay for these tax cuts for the wealthiest, but to try to claw it back for over 1,500 local and regional public TV and radio stations throughout the country. Many of these stations provide free, high-quality programming to millions of households in rural areas. A lot of them don't even have what they need to see it online, and this is actually how they get their news, but even without that, they're in their cars a lot, they have long ways to drive, they get a lot of stuff off the radio. I know that in my state, this would be particularly devastating. We have a lot of rural areas. Minnesota has a long history of public radio and TV programming. Every week, 20 million people across the country listen to the Minnesota public radio programs that were originally produced by Marketplace, right? Since 1967, its award-winning news operation has documented some of the most important stories of our time. Minnesotans coming from Cambodia, what was happening there? It was public radio that was covering that. In 1988, NPR's Main Street Radio produced a documentary called Against the Grain, which gave rural Minnesotans the mic to talk about how they were handling economic change. In 2007, NPR News covered every detail of the collapse of the 35W bridge, which was, of course, also warnings to people about where they had to go, what was happening, what was closed down. They're covering research on dementia, state plans for K through 12 education. The legislative session right now, both the public TV and public radio station are diligently covering every single detail of that. While so many other news organizations have gone away or broken down, what do we want to have? No coverage of a city council in Bemidji, Minnesota? We don't want to know what's happening on Main Street? We don't want to know when a flood comes in, what stores are open and when? why would we decide to cut ourselves off from information at this moment in time? Public TV, it's a place where so many people get their news. 58% of households watch PBS programming in a year. PBS Kids, 15 million monthly viewers of PBS Kids. And yeah, that's right, they don't get exposed to all the advertising, all the stuff they'd see online because they're watching the PBS Kids. I think that's actually a pretty cool thing for our country, that there's a place that kids can watch these programs. Every month, 36 million Americans watch their local PBS. I was just at KMSQ-TV in Austin, Minnesota. I'm sure most of the people haven't heard of it, but boy, the people in Austin, it's pretty important. Tens of thousands of people, that's where they get their news. 72% local carry. The former Republican Senate leader in the state Senate, he's on the board because they know this is a place they can find out about local news or what's happening. It's where they can find out about local news in places like Granite Falls, Minnesota, in places like Bemidji, Minnesota. All across the country, in times of crisis, public radio and TV are essential to public safety. While many other news sources lost power and internet during Hurricane Helene, Asheville's Blue Ridge Public Radio stayed online, bringing life-saving news and information to the over 500,000 people in the region without power. When Hurricane Milton devastated the Tampa area, the local public station, WSF, hosted live call-in shows, aired frequent local news briefings, and maintained a regularly updated live blog with a text-only low bandwidth option to keep residents informed and safe before and after the storm. I have been in so many areas of my state in a time of crisis, of flooding, where you go down there and the mayor in a real small town is sitting there, but he's live streaming on their local public access, because that's the way. Where else are people going to go? Are they going to try 80 different platforms on social media? Are they going to go and try to figure out which local TV station in the Twin Cities, miles away, are maybe showing something every so often about their problems? They go to public access purely for safety's sake, much less for kids seeing really good programming that's free of all the commercial aspects that are coming kids' ways every single day, or the interesting in-depth kind of reporting you can have on a place like Marketplace for what's happening with the economy, or something to listen to when you're driving for hours and hours and hours that doesn't mean endless ads and endless marketing, because you actually get to hear the news, or you actually get to hear some music you like. That's what public TV and public radio do for us. It's a treasure in our country. Public broadcasting creates a more informed community through quality programming on local and national events. And I think it's really going to be important as we debate this in the next few weeks that remember that local part. It shines a light on the people, places, history, and stories that are the fabric of towns and cities, addressing the most pressing issues. We must support these vital resources that give voice to important local issues that wouldn't otherwise be heard. They're going to be lost to history. It's going to be a further erosion of the fabric. So what do people do instead? Oh, go look on Twitter and see if you can protect your kids from a bunch of bad stuff that's on there. I use that. A bunch of us in here, almost all of us have accounts. It's an important way to reach people. I'm not cutting it down. But I'd much rather have a kid in my state be watching the programming on public radio than looking on social media accounts right now, or be watching it on public TV and listening to the radio. It's a safe space for them to get some programming. The president's request would also deepen the damage this administration has done to our standing in the world through its reckless cuts to foreign aid. Give you one example, the president would impose major cuts to PEPFAR, the program that began under President George W. Bush to prevent the spread of HIV/AIDS. Over many years, this program has earned consistent bipartisan support across 4 administrations and 10 Congresses. It's credited with saving over 25 million lives. These programs not only demonstrate Americans' humanitarian leadership, which certainly helps when you need a friend, when there's a conflict going on abroad, and you can point to things that you did working with other countries. They also are good for our country. We know that you just can't bury your head in the sand and hope that these problems in other countries and diseases aren't heading your way. Whether it's Ebola or malaria or bird flu, oftentimes these things come in from other countries. Pandemic, right? They come in from other countries. So why would we at this moment in time cut off our investments in public health and in food aid and other things that are not only right based on your belief that we're part of this world and your faith or whatever makes you believe that if we can save some lives for a small part of the federal budget in America because we're so good at innovation and we're so good at producing things, and yes, we have some extra food, and yes, we have some rural economy that we want to keep strong, but also just from a purely American selfish version of this. And I don't mean selfish like a bad thing. I mean selfish like looking out for ourselves and our country. You would want to work with the rest of the world so these diseases doesn't come in your doors, or you don't shut out and anger other countries when 90% of our customers, potential customers, are outside of our borders. You want to be able to sell stuff to them. But not if we cut ourselves off from the rest of the world and make fun of them and call them the 51st state. The president's proposed cuts to funding for UNICEF are also misguided. I was one of those kids at Halloween that would go trick-or-treating. I'd have my bag and then this little UNICEF box. So people would put some pennies in, and I learned how much that each of those dimes would mean for food for kids in other countries. We should be at the forefront of supporting brighter futures for children facing the hardships of poverty so the next generation can build strong societies and become close partners with the United States. Think about people that study in our colleges and graduate schools from other countries. Think about what they offer us. Yeah, they pay their way a lot of the time. That helps colleges. But you know what else they do? Sometimes they stay. Sometimes they stay for a few years. Basically, they're getting advanced degrees. They're getting skills that we want them to get. And sometimes we want them to stay in our country. In my mind, we should be stapling a green card to their diplomas. And that is how, when you look at Fortune 500 companies in our country and who's headed it up, a huge amount of them are immigrants or kids of immigrants that were educated in our country. That's such a big part of our economy and our advantage across the world. Why would we be cutting off? Or they go back to their home countries and say, you know, I kind of liked it there. They start a business, then they do business with our country. That's how this has worked. American businesses need access to emerging markets. Many countries that have received U.S. assistance have become important American trading partners. The connection between foreign assistance and American prosperity is especially clear in agriculture. America has proudly fed the world for decades, and food aid has been a critical component of that effort. Food aid is a significant market for American farmers, purchasing over $4.25 billion in American commodities from 20 to 24. Minnesota's farmers and ag businesses sold a total of $70 million in ag products to USAID's Food for Peace program in 2024 alone. Continuing this aid should not be a partisan issue. It never has, or we never would have gotten it done for all these years. It has been completely bipartisan. Some people come at it, as I said, because of their faith and their belief in helping the world. Some people come at it in terms of economics and think this is how we help people, and then this open the markets for us. Some people come at it from a security standpoint, which I mentioned with health, but also applies in other ways. If you help people and you are their friends, it can lead to good things down the line. Mr. President, cutting funding for this international aid, not to mention cutting ourselves off from the information we need, especially in rural areas that so often in news deserts rely on public radio and public TV for their information, is sending our democracy backwards at a time when we are completely connected and should be connected to the rest of the world. These investments, compared to the rest of the federal budget, aren't as big, but their influence in the immediate and in the long term is immense. They strengthen our country at home and strengthen American leadership around the world. This is a test of our values, yeah, but it is also economically the right thing to do. To keep a fragmented country that is ever divided, somewhat on the same plane by their kids having a public TV program to watch and learn from their community being able to tune in and watch a local sports game, or able to get their news about what happened on their city council and talk about it the next day. So one person says, I don't know what happened. I read this on Facebook. And the other person says, no, that's not true. I actually saw the local news in Austin and I saw what it said on our local public TV network. They don't even maybe know what that is, but they know what it is, and this is what I found out. That's how people can come to some common agreement about what's happening in our world, and there's no better place to start than on a local level, which is why when you talk to Republican or Democratic mayors or city council members, they'll tell you, if we don't have that, how are we ever going to debate this levy proposal? How are we ever going to get people to understand why we have to make a decision about the school and whether we close it down or whether we expand it or whether we close another school down? How are they ever going to have that without a public access station? In this day and age, this idea that what are we going to do? Just expect everyone to go out when they've got 3 kids, they're supposed to go out to every single meeting and watch it themselves? Or they're supposed to rely that maybe it's going to get the right information on Twitter, but they're not sure if that person's telling the truth or that person's telling the truth? Or we are going to give them the first front line of information, which is what C-SPAN does, by the way, which is why Senator Grassley and I are trying to make sure that we get that C-SPAN on platforms like YouTube, owned by Google, by Hulu, owned by Disney, in the modern day. And same thing here. I want to make sure there are some sources where people can gather and look at this news and know they're getting something quality, know they're getting something either that entertains them with music, without every single song having an ad in the middle of it, and that they're able to get the news they need to be good citizens of this great country. That's what's on the line with these rescissions. I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks.
President,
I recognize
Are we in
the
a quorum
Democrat
call?
whip. Yes,
I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
without objection.
So a lot of people are asking the question, Mr. President, what exactly were people voting for in the last presidential election? Well, many things. We have many citizens who are voters in this country. But the recurring theme seems to be the cost of living for the average family. The ability of mothers and fathers to make ends meet and to see a realization of their dreams and aspirations. But we were told over and over again that families across this country were being overwhelmed by the cost of living, gas, groceries, housing. And so they gave a majority of the votes to President Trump, who promised he would make America great again. Since taking office, I don't believe that the president has come near to keeping his promise. Instead, he has hired many of his billionaire buddies and cut deals with the ultra-wealthy that will harm the same Americans who voted for him. I'm not going to get into his cryptocurrency schemes and how it's enriched him and his family. Let's set that aside for a minute and talk about issues that apply to every person. Hidden in more than 1,000 pages in the bill that passed the House of Representatives is a plan, a laundry list of things that I don't believe the Americans even considered voting for in the last November election. They're going to have a devastating impact on families in states red and blue alike. The main takeaway from this is the one big, ugly bill. Billionaires are going to win and American families are going to lose. Do you think the voters in last November's election for President of the United States would actually vote to close down their local hospital? That's what's looming. Now you say, oh, you Democrats and your scare tactics. That can't possibly be true. Well, let me tell you what happened, Mr. President. 3 weeks ago, 20 hospital administrators from across the state of Illinois, from Chicago down to the southernmost part of our state, all took a special trip to Washington to warn me that the bill that was pending before the House of Representatives threatened the survival of hospitals across our state. These are hospitals which are not only critical for providing professional medical care, delivering babies, saving people's lives who are in automobile accidents, but also major parts of the local economy. You come to rural, small-town, Midwest America and ask the impact of the local hospital, and they'll tell you, we don't know that we could keep a business or attract a business if we didn't have it. We count on it every day to be there when we need it. And secondly, it's a major employer. In fact, in most towns, the biggest employer in downstate. And then they warn me, many of these hospitals are hanging on by a thread. The money that they receive from government insurance programs like Medicaid keeps the doors open and the lights on and the doctors in town. And now we have a proposal from the Republicans to cut that Medicaid benefit for 16 million Americans. This would be the largest cutback in health insurance protection in the history of the United States. That's what's been sent over by the House of Representatives and is presently under consideration by the Republican leadership here in the Senate. Nationwide, half of all rural hospitals already operate in the red, and more than 300 rural hospitals are at immediate risk of closure. 26 in Kansas, 22 in Alabama, 9 in Missouri. How many closed hospitals will the Republicans accept as part of their plan? Let me tell you, I'm from downstate Illinois, proud to represent the city of Chicago all these years, but prouder still of being from downstate and trying to keep track of all the needs that they have for this economy to prosper. I know rural hospitals are the backbone of many communities in downstate Illinois, critical emergency medical care, anchors of the local economy. Now you dig into this deeply into this Republican budget bill that's come over from the House of Representatives, and it turns out they are not just eliminating health insurance coverage for 16 million Americans, they are also cutting Medicare. Now, Medicare is a program primarily for elderly people in this country. It has been a miracle worker. Medicare was created in the 1960s, and it's no coincidence or surprise that the life expectancy of Americans went up as Medicare took root and became part of health care in America. Despite promising to leave Medicare alone, which everyone has said from Donald Trump on down, Republicans couldn't help themselves. They slashed Medicare benefits and reduced access to hospitals, nursing homes, and medications for seniors in all 50 states, Medicaid and Medicare. So why would Republicans in Congress take a wrecking ball to these two major parts of our healthcare system? To provide money for tax breaks to the wealthiest people in America. I'll bet you think he's making that up. I'll bet you it's another one of those political schemes of his. It's not being made up, it's true. They want to generate enough money to give tax breaks to wealthy people. Based on a new update from the Congressional Budget Office today, up to 16 million Americans are now estimated to lose their health insurance coverage under this Republican plan that passed the House and is now being considered by the Senate Republicans. I can just tell you this from a personal basis, there is no more helpless feeling in the world than to be a father with no health insurance and being told that your beautiful baby has a serious medical complication. I know, I've been there. Some Republicans are downplaying these catastrophic health cuts. On the Senate floor earlier today, a Republican senator said that people on Medicaid are lazy and play video games all day. At a recent town hall meeting, when a concerned constituent raised the Republican proposal, Medicaid cuts, and said that people would die, there became a great controversy, the response of the senator to that comment. It sounds like Republicans in Congress want to be the ones deciding who is worthy of health care in America. But Americans who depend on Medicaid are not strangers. They're your neighbors, they're people at your church, your school, and at your work. It probably is your family too. If you or a loved one gets sick, will congressional Republicans deem you deserving of seeing a doctor? Is that what this debate was all about? Is that what this election was all about? Did the American people vote for tax cuts for billionaires? I don't think so. A party like the Republicans, who claim they're the party of the working class billionaires, they refuse to put their money where their mouth is. Republicans in Congress may say they're just trying to lower your taxes, but most of the benefit is going to wealthy people who won't even notice it. Maybe their bookkeepers and accountants will give them the good news that they just saved another $200,000, $300,000 in taxes. Under the Republican plan, taxpayers and the wealthiest, 0.1%, would get a $300,000 tax cut every year. $300,000 for the richest of the richest in America. Why? At the expense of health care for 16 million Americans? It makes no sense. The average full-time worker making a minimum wage on average would receive a tax break as well. I've got to be honest about it. It's $20 a month. $300,000 for the richest of the rich, $20 a month for the working stiff. How can that possibly be fair? Did the American people vote to slash jobs across the economy in the last November election? I don't think so. Since we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, 85% of investment in clean energy technology has landed in Republican districts. Now, I know the President of the United States calls global warming and environmental issues a hoax. He's been hanging with that story for a long time, even though we know something is happening. Notice the extreme weather events across the United States and around the world. They're getting more frequent and more costly. Is it a coincidence or is something going on? I happen to believe something's going on. In just 2 years since passing the Inflation Reduction Act, businesses have announced 340 new clean technology projects. One estimate says that these projects will create 150,000 permanent jobs. I've seen it in my state. That includes more than 9,000 jobs in Texas, 4,800 in Ohio, 4,500 in Indiana, and 2,700 in my home state of Illinois. The Republicans' big, ugly bill puts these jobs at risk, taking a hatchet to tax policy that make these projects possible. The promise of a Republican repeal has already scared the private sector into withdrawing $14 billion in investment and canceling 10,000 clean energy manufacturing jobs. Why would the so-called party of the working class want to give their own constituents a pink slip? I don't get it. Now, some of my Republican colleagues have been brave enough to raise alarms about the Medicaid cuts, roll back clean energy credits, and the cost of the bill. You know what the cost of this bill is to give tax breaks to the wealthiest people? $3.8 trillion more on the deficit over the next decade. We already know the scammer-in-chief will try to bully Republicans into choosing billionaires over working families, using anything he can to persuade them or threaten them. My Republican colleagues must know that this plan does not make America great again. It makes our debt the greatest in the history of our nation. But instead, it harms families in red and blue states looking for a fair shot. Their lip service to these terrible cuts is not enough. I urge a handful of my Republican colleagues, and that's all it takes. Show some courage, show some common sense, tell the folks in the House and tell the White House as well, this approach is not going to work. Taking health insurance away from 16 million Americans, more than has ever happened in the history of this country, is unfair, fundamentally unfair, and we all know it. We know it intuitively, that's just not fair. Taking Medicaid away from reimbursing hospitals and doctors with critical care in small towns and rural areas is a mistake that we'll pay for generations to come. I urge my Republicans to listen to their constituents, because I know that Americans who voted for Trump in November did not vote for what I've just described today on the floor of the Senate. We need 4 Republicans, 4, to stand up and say, this doesn't make sense. Too much debt, too much pain for families, too much of a gamble for rural areas and small town America. We've got to stand up and make a much better effort, and we should do it on a bipartisan basis as quickly as possible. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Thank you. No, I don't. Thank you.
I recognize the senator from Rhode Island.
In my effort to alert our somnolent body to the looming dangers of climate change, since President Trump's inauguration in January, he has embarked upon a series of actions that quite simply defy reality. They obey the fossil fuel industry, but they defy reality. Or maybe it's the other way around. They defy reality to obey the fossil fuel industry. On his very first day in office, he issued an executive order declaring that wind energy and solar energy are not energy. This defies even the dictionary, and it ignores the fact that humans have been harnessing wind and solar power since well before we started combusting fossil fuels. In March, Trump's EPA administrator announced his intention to undo the agency's finding that carbon pollution endangers human health and welfare, despite the fact that the harms and costs associated with climate change become more evident every day. In May, Jeff Clark, who runs the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs at OMB, part of the OMB fossil fuel stooge platoon, best known for his involvement in crooked Keystone Cops' efforts to overturn the 2020 election, issued a memo directing agencies to stop using the social cost of carbon in agency decision-making. Again, despite the fact that we know that carbon pollution costs the government and the public money, lots of money. Now we hear that Trump's EPA is readying to rescind a rule limiting carbon pollution from certain fossil fuel-fired power plants on the pretense that emissions from these plants do not significantly contribute to climate change, despite the fact that the carbon pollution from fossil fuel-fired U.S. power plants is greater than all the carbon pollution from all but 6 countries in the world. It's a major contributor. Put simply, in Trump's world, facts don't matter, and the truth is whatever his fossil fuel donors say it is. And now this fossil fuel influence operation has actually infiltrated its way into government, and it is effecting the fossil fuel industry's desires from inside. This would be a sorry enough state of affairs by itself. A president of the United States who ignores facts and lives in a phony alternate reality of a polluting industry's making. But it gets worse when others modulate their own worldviews and actions to rely less on facts, on the immutable laws of nature and economics, and instead on nonsensical utterances about climate change and wacko energy policy. Take our Fed chair, Jerome Powell. After admitting to Senator Tina Smith on the Senate Banking Committee in February that climate change would make it impossible to get insurance and therefore impossible to get mortgages in certain coastal and wildfire-exposed regions of the country, he fell into line behind Trumpian denialism. 3 days before Trump's inauguration, he pulled the Fed out of an international network of central banks that researches climate-related financial and economic risks. The European Central Bank and the central banks of China, Canada, Mexico, Japan, the UK, and more than 80 other countries are members. But not us. Not anymore. Then in May, the Fed pressured an international banking supervision organization to disband its task force overseeing climate risk. Thankfully, the other central banks refused. Last, the Fed dissolved its own climate risk working groups. Can't have those anymore, not when our polluter-funded dear leader says it's all a hoax. Or take Daniel Yergin, Peter Orszag, and Atul Arya, three people who should know better. They waited barely a month after Trump's inauguration before publishing a 5,000-word manifesto in Foreign Affairs in defense of what they call energy pragmatism. What is energy pragmatism, you might ask? Basically, it's a Trump-friendly and factually challenged theory that transitioning to green energy is too complicated and expensive, so we may as well resolve ourselves to using fossil fuels for a long, long time to come. Despite its 5,000-word length and despite its inclusion of a section entitled "It's the Economy," this piece never mentioned the massive costs and systemic economic risks already looming from climate change. Quite an omission, literally only one side of the case. Which brings me back to the social cost of carbon. There was a time when Republicans were the great champions of cost-benefit analysis. Ronald Reagan was the first to mandate its use in the regulatory process. Obviously far from perfect, it does make sense to have a monetary estimate of the costs and benefits associated with a particular regulatory action. That is the social cost of carbon. It calculates the climate-related costs from adding an additional ton of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, or alternatively, the benefits from removing or eliminating a ton of carbon pollution. The social cost of carbon is not a new concept. Economists have been using it for decades. Yet Clark's memo argues that the social cost of carbon shouldn't be used because a monetized estimate of the costs of 1 ton of carbon pollution is too uncertain. So they recommend 0. Well, first of all, we do know one thing about this, and that is that the cost isn't 0. Our own lived experiences teach us that. And there's actually case law to the effect that the number is not 0. We also know it's not even close to 0. Every serious academic estimate of the social cost of carbon is well north of $50, with most well over $100 per ton. EPA's last estimate, informed by copious academic research, was $190 per ton in harm from carbon dioxide. The International Monetary Fund calculates that there is a subsidy to the fossil fuel industry in the United States every single year of $700 billion, which is their valuation of the pollute-for-free fossil fuel business model. You can back calculate from that to an effective cost of carbon pollution of around $150 per ton. Whether $150 per ton or $190 per ton, these weren't even the highest estimates out there. There are credible estimates in the hundreds of dollars per ton. Much of the variation among the costs comes from the choice of what damage you attempt to quantify. For example, that EPA estimate at $190 per ton only looked at 4 harms. It only looked at increased mortality, damage to agriculture, increased energy costs, and damage from sea level rise. Those 4 things. It did not consider the systemic financial and economic risks from climate change of the sort that I have discussed so frequently in this body, the ones to which Fed Chair Powell alluded when he admitted that climate change would render parts of our country uninsurable and hence unmortgageable. That is a huge, looming economic blow, not in the EPA calculation. In other words, almost all estimates of the social cost of carbon are underestimates because they do not attempt to quantify all climate-related costs and damages. Trump's polluter-run OMB wants us to ignore all of this. The logic is really stunning here, or I should probably say the illogic, because they say it's not clear what number is right, we'll use 0, a number we know is wrong. That simply doesn't make sense, but it does solve the problem of the fossil fuel industry having to account for the harm that it causes. It is a massive favor to the fossil fuel industry. So be clear, this is yet another oily fossil fuel thumb pressed down on the scale to help big polluters. Climate pollution is a global problem. Our emissions harm Americans and the rest of the world. Chinese emissions harm the Chinese and the rest of the world. And harms that occur to people in other countries end up having real costs here at home as well. Some of them fall in the national security space. Take the Syrian civil war, which destabilized the Middle East and led to periodic American military intervention. A long-term severe drought exacerbated by climate change is widely understood to have played a role in that conflict. Look at nuclear-armed India and Pakistan, which have been at odds for decades. As glaciers shrink in the Himalayas due to climate change, water becomes eventually more scarce, raising tensions as these adversaries compete for a dwindling supply of that essential need. Then there are the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, hit hard by a drought made worse by climate change. The drought made it harder for subsistence farmers to eke out a living, contributing to the surge in migration to the U.S. Faraway events have economic effects here at home as well. A drought in Panama lowers water in the Panama Canal and slows shipping, making it more expensive. A drought or flood hits a major agricultural exporter and makes food here at home more expensive. A flood in Thailand swamps factories and provokes a shortage here in car parts. The global economy is interconnected. Climate-related droughts, floods, fires, and storms in foreign lands impose real costs on Americans here at home. The legions of bootlickers who orbit around Trump remind me of the legend of King Canute. King Canute, like President Trump today, was surrounded by hordes of flattering courtiers. Unlike President Trump, King Canute was displeased by his courtiers' relentless flattery that he was all-powerful. So, to give his courtiers a lesson, King Canute set his throne by the sea edge and commanded the incoming tide to halt so as not to wet his feet. Well, of course, the tide took no mind of King Canute's words, continued its advance, and washed over his feet. King Canute exclaimed, "Let all men know how empty and worthless is the power of kings, for there is none worthy of the name but he whom heaven, earth, and sea obey by eternal laws." Well, those words should particularly resonate today, because climate change is real, and it is driven by eternal laws, by the natural laws of chemistry, for instance, and physics. And a latter-day ersatz king saying otherwise makes no difference at all to the natural systems of this planet driven by nature's laws. Climate change is going to be very expensive, very disruptive, and very damaging. The warnings are already everywhere, and Florida's insurance crisis is a preview of coming attractions for all America's coastal communities. I won't dwell in this speech on that list of warnings. I spoke over and over about the many different agencies and experts, from insurance industry CEOs to insurance industry board members to the chairman of the Federal Reserve to the chief economist of Freddie Mac to the Economist magazine to the International Financial Stability Board, and on and on and on. It is over and over the same warning. The warning that climate change is disrupting the planet so much that risks are becoming so unpredictable that insurance is becoming either flat out unavailable or unaffordable on its way to unavailable, and that insurance crisis quickly spills over into a mortgage crisis, because you cannot get a mortgage on a property on which you cannot get insurance, and that mortgage crisis cascades into a crash in property values, because if you bought your home with a mortgage, you probably need to sell it to somebody who needs a mortgage, and if you can't sell to that entire population of human beings who need a mortgage to buy your house, because your house won't sustain a mortgage because it can't get insurance, then your market just crashed, and the value of your home did as well. I've shown here at this podium the map from First Street that predicted what, in the time period of a 30-year mortgage, is going to happen to home values around the country from this insurance to mortgage to values cascade. And in some places, the loss of value was at 100%, a zeroing out. But even where the loss of value is going to be 20% or 40%, think what that does to that community, where all of the property in that community has lost that much value. Think of what that does to the community bank in that community and its solvency, its loan-to-value ratio, when the value of the collateral for its loans has crashed 20 to 40%. This is coming. And there's an answer. Renewable energy and low-carbon technologies, already cheap, getting cheaper. Plus, whoever dominates those industries will dominate the 21st century. So let's protect ourselves from that looming threat. Let's make sure that who dominates the 21st century in energy is the United States. Let's not give away America's position in that competition to our foreign rivals just to humor a corrupt political influence effort here at home. That would be a disgraceful outcome, but it is the one we are headed for. With that, I yield the floor. Mr. Decorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks.
Speaker, I ask quorum call be.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Under the previous order, the question occurs on the Bowman nomination. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman.
Yes.
Mrs. Britt. Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young, Senators voting in the affirmative: Bozeman, Justice, Moreno, Paul, and Sullivan. Senators voting in the negative: Cortez Masto, Kane, Klobuchar, Lujan, Merkley, Sanders, Schiff, Shaheen, and Whitehouse. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Ms. Hassan, no. Mr. Wyden, no. Ms. Smith, no. Mr. Markey, no. Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Kennedy, aye. Mr. King, no. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Grassley, aye. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed, no. Mr. Van Hollen. Mr. Van Hollen, no. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, no. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Padilla, no. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Mr. Rounds. Mr. Rounds, aye. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Mrs. Murray. Mrs. Murray, no. Mr. Welch. Mr. Welch, no. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, aye. Ms. Baldwin. Ms. Baldwin, no. Ms. Warren. Ms. Warren, no. Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy, aye. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Mr. Tillis. Mr. Tillis, aye. Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim, no. Ms. Rosen. Ms. Rosen, no. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schatz, no. Mr. Young. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Heinrich, no. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, aye. Mr. Banks, aye. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mr. Husted, aye. Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mr. Durbin, no. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mr. Cruz, aye. Mr. Wicker, aye. Mr. Coons, no. Mr. Warnock, no. Mrs. Britt, aye. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mr. Mullen, aye. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Moran, aye. Mr. Hawley, aye. Mr. Risch, aye. Ms. Ernst, aye. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Barrasso, aye. Mr. Fetterman. Mr. Fetterman, no.
I heard you were looking for me. I called you back.
Mr. Curtis. Mr. Curtis, aye. Mr. Hughes. Mr. Haggerty. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mrs. Hyde-Smith, aye.
Megan.
Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Hickenlooper, no.
Sorry, this has just been a bad day.
Ms. Duckworth. Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Crapo, aye. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Fisher, aye. Mr. Budd. Mr. Budd, aye. Mr. Lee, aye. Mr. Thune, aye. Mr. McCormick, aye. Mr. Gallego, Mr. Gallego, no. Mr. Kelly, no. Ms. Hirono, no. Ms. Cantwell, no. Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mr. Booker, no. Ms. Also Brooks, no. Ms. Blunt Rochester, no. Ms. Slotkin, no. Mr. Schmidt, aye. Mr. Peters, no. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Marshall, aye.
gotta do important stuff. That's the whole. Okay. On this vote, the yeas are 48 and the nays are 46. The nomination is confirmed. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid upon the table, and the president will immediately notify the Senate of the Senate's actions. Under the previous order, the question occurs on the Walsh nomination. There is sufficient second. There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks. Warner, Booker. No. Wait. Kennedy. Moody. Kennedy. Thank you. Risch. Blumenthal. Hold on just a moment, please. Warren, Smith.
I am whatever Republicans are.
I'll get you. Ms. Baldwin.
Scott.
Thank you.
Aye.
I got you, too. Will you check to see if Warner voted aye on the cloture? Got you. Mr. Banks. Yes. Durbin, Van Hollen, Padilla. Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Thank you. Thank you. I did, sir. Thank you. Have a good one. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Thank you. Was he? What was he on cloture? Warner? I'll get him. I'll get him in a second. Just a second. Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell. I wait. I got you. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, thanks, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty. Thank you. Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper,
administration that fell a lot. We don't want to have that. We don't want to have any of that. Well, I'm delighted to welcome to the White House the thousands of proud American patriots, and that's what you are, you're patriots. You know, we've never done this before. You know that, right? They didn't do it. The previous administration wouldn't have thought of doing it. But we're going to do it for 4 more years. I don't know, maybe 8 more years. But we love you all. You're really amazing, successful people all, and you just gave your heart and your soul, and we won every swing state. We won the popular vote by millions. We won everything you can win. And now we have a successful country. Doesn't it feel different? So many people say, go away, and all over the world they say it feels different. The whole world feels different, so it's an honor. It's a great honor, believe me, and we should all be happy.